Thanks, Hima. Hello, everyone. Myself, Nitin Gupta, working at IBM Research India, where we are solving some of the interesting and challenging problems related to data quality, which can affect the performance of machine learning models. In the previous part of the talk, Hima discussed the need and importance of the data quality for machine learning tasks. She had also described some of the cleaning operators that people use widely in literature. She had also discussed about class imbalance metric, which is one of the important metrics that can be badly affect any ML model. In this part of our talk, I will discuss some of the other important metrics which can hamper the performance of underlying machine learning tasks. I hope you guys are excited to hear about these interesting metrics. Let me start with label noise data quality metric. As the name suggests, the goal of this metric is to identify label error in the data and correct them. This would help to model the data better for underlying task. Examples on the right side of the slide gives a visual illustration of what label error means. For example, the first image, which is from Google Quick Draw dataset, belongs to the elephant class, but the ground truth for this image in the dataset is mosquito, which is a label error. Similarly, the second image is tagged as 5, but actually it's an image of 3. If you look at the third example, which is basically Amazon 5-star review, but in the dataset it is labeled as a 1-star review. All these are examples of label noise present in the dataset, which can affect the model performance drastically. The last example is related to label noise and Tableau data. From the table, we can see that ideally the class of last sample should be Iris virginica, not Iris setosa. This is because if you look at the value of the attributes of this sample, they look more similar to Iris virginica sample. It might be possible that by mistake someone has labeled this as a sample from a wrong class. Such a sample can create a confusion while learning a model. Also in literature, it is mentioned that in one of the largest image dataset, that is ImageNet dataset, there are at least 100,000 label issues present. There can be multiple sources of these label errors, like at the time of labeling, insufficient labeling information provided to the user. Another reason can be subjectivity of a labeling task. For example, in an image having two people wearing white shirt talking to each other, then one can label that image as a person image, another person can label it as a white cloth image, or a third person can provide some other label to it. Another possible source of label noise could be errors in labeling itself, typos due to miscommunication, lack of domain knowledge, etc. These label issues can have several adverse effects on models. For example, training a model on noisy data can decrease the classifier performance on the test data. This is because noisy samples can change the boundary of the classifier. It can also change the neighborhood points, and some models might memorize those noisy samples. It can also pose a threat to the feature selection mechanism by providing a wrong label information. In online setting, new correct label data might contradict the original data labels. It can also increase the model runtime complexity by selecting more complex model or by selecting a model with complex hyperparameters. For example, learning decision tree type classifier on noise-free data might give a model with less number of branches. However, noisy data might lead to more number of branches, which can take more runtime on test data. In literature, people have handled label noise problem in two ways: by building a more robust algorithms and optimization functions, and by applying a data pre-processing before building any ML model. Drawbacks with algorithm level approaches are that these approaches are not directly extendable to other approaches. For example, if user had designed some parameter which can take care of a noisy labels for one ML model, there is no guarantee that same function or parameter will work for another classifier. Data level approaches are more flexible as there is no dependencies on the underlying ML task. In data level approaches, we try to filter the noise before passing it to underlying model in a hope that more clean data will provide less complex or simpler models, which can help in improving overall classification task performance. For algorithm-based noise handling techniques, there are a lot of work in literature, and people are now exploring this direction with respect to deep learning models. I listed down some of the papers with respect to this dimension, which has been published in the past in top conferences like NIPS, IIII, CVPR, ICLR. On the other hand, there are only few work in terms of a data level approaches. I have listed some of the work here that we'll discuss in more detail in next slides. In my opinion, this direction is more important as compared to algorithm-based noise handling because in data-based approaches, one can propose an approach independent of the model. In today's era, researchers are proposing new optimization functions, deep learning models, to solve some of the underlying machine learning tasks like classification. To handle the noise in each of these models, one has to modify or change an existing method, which is not always possible or easy to develop. So our focus will be on data level approaches to handle the label noise. In literature, researchers are mainly focused on developing filter-based approaches to handle the noise in a dataset. In the first paper, Identifying Mislabeled Training Data, which was published in Journal of Artificial Intelligence in 1999, the authors have used a simple approach where they first trained the filters or classifiers on the part of a training data in order to identify mislabeled examples on the remaining training data. For example, like in cross-validation, we train model on X portion of the data and do validation on rest of the data. Similar approach is being used here by the authors. Once the filters are trained, authors use two different voting schemes. First one is the majority voting. This scheme tags an instance as mislabeled if more than half of the filters cannot classify the sample correctly. Another voting scheme is consensus voting. If all the filters fail to classify the sample correctly, then that sample is tagged as noisy sample. At the end, authors have removed all those noisy samples from the dataset and then trained the final ML model to show the improvement. Another paper titled On Labeling Characters in Computer Vision Datasets, which was published in 2018 in Interactive Adaptive Learning Workshop, which was the part of a PKDD conference, where authors trained CNN ensembles to detect incorrect labels using majority voting scheme. In the third paper, Finding Label Noise Examples in Large Datasets, authors have proposed a two-level approach. At first level, they train SVM on unfiltered data and consider support vectors as potential candidates for noisy samples. In the second level, the authors first remove those support vectors from the dataset and train another classifier and then pass the entire dataset to the model. Samples for which the original and the predicted label does not match are marked as label noise. All these approaches employ a simple filter-based approach where first we train set of filters and then based on that use different voting mechanism or different classifier prediction to detect whether the sample is noisy or not. This is another interesting paper which was published in ICML 2003. This is the flowchart of the approach that paper follows. This paper first partitions the data into several subsets, and for each subset, it learns rules similar to decision trees. For each subset, algorithm first finds the set of good rules that the authors of paper defined as GR. Authors have defined the following two criteria for a rule to belong to good rule. It should have classification precision on its own partition above a certain threshold, let's say T, and it should have minimum coverage on its own partition, where coverage is defined as how many examples a rule can classify confidently. Once we have these good rules for all the subsets, authors evaluate these good rules on the entire dataset, and then based on different criteria, authors identify which samples are good, which are noisy samples, which are partially cleaned samples, and then repeat this algorithm on partially cleaned samples until and unless the entire dataset is classified into two groups, that is clean and noisy groups. This algorithm also follows the same filter-based approach, but the only difference is that it uses multiple iterations, where at each iteration the dataset size reduces after selecting good and noisy samples, and only partially cleaned samples are left for the next iteration. Another interesting work that exists in literature is related to confident learning, which was published in 2019. In this work, the authors have followed three principles that are prune, count, and rank. It is assumed that the probability of each sample belonging to a class is given. In case it's not available, then the user can use existing model or a classifier to get the probability values for each sample. This framework uses this information to calculate the confidence joint matrix, which is different from the confusion matrix. To calculate the confidence joint matrix, the authors check the probability of each sample with average class thresholds, and if the sample threshold is greater than more than one class, then to remove the ambiguity, the class with max probability value is considered. And if only one class satisfies the average threshold condition, then the value of that particular entry in the matrix is increased by 1. Diagonal entries of confidence joint matrix represent non-noisy point with respect to the given probability distribution, and the non-diagonal entry represent count of possible noisy points in datasets. The authors also proposes a way to normalize the confidence joint matrix, and this is the formulation for the same. For the third principle, that is the rank, authors have proposed many methods. In the first method, authors consider all the non-diagonal entries in confusion matrix as the noisy points. This is similar to the filter-based approaches that we discussed in the last few slides. In the another approach, authors use the non-diagonal entries of the confidence joint matrix as the noisy points. This is again similar to the filter-based approach. In the third approach, for each class, authors select X percentage of the low probability samples and mark them as the noisy points. In the fourth approach, which is a little bit interesting, where authors are finding probability margin between samples of two classes, then taking the sample with maximum margin as the noisy points. In the last one, authors took the intersection of the above two approaches. In paper, it was mentioned that prune by noise rate approach is more effective as compared to other methods. This figure shows some of the qualitative results of a confident joint learning approach on imaginary dataset. Images highlighted with red boxes represent label errors, as we can also see from the first image in the figure that the clean label of this image is jigsaw puzzle, not drum, due to which this technique marks this sample as a noisy. Images highlighted with blue boxes represent samples where multiple labels are possible, but the image is stuck with only one label. If we look at the third image in the first row of a figure, the image contains both the dock and the container shape, but the given label is only from the dock class. That's why this algorithm detected an issue in this sample. Green box represent ontological issues, that means similar labels which follow is a or has a kind of relationship. Like in first image of a second row, the provided label is CRT screen and the guest label is oscilloscope. Both labels are correct as these labels follow is a or a has a kind of a relationship. Ideally, a dataset should include only one of these labels. This is how confident learning approach helps in determining label noise in the dataset. So these are some of the interesting works with respect to the label noise quality metric in literature. Getting this issue at the data level itself will help in building a better model. The next metric which we'll discuss today is related to data valuation. Here we first see what does data valuation do and how it helps in improving the underlying ML model. Then we'll discuss three state-of-the-art techniques in this area: leave one out, data shapely, and reinforcement learning based approach. As we know that each point in the training data did not contribute same towards the model performance. Data valuation based techniques helps in assigning the value to each training data point based on the impact the sample has on the predictor performance. The performance is measured with the help of validation data, which is assumed to be noise-free and can capture the properties of underlying information to be learned. For example, if a user wants to learn a model with respect to two classes, that is a dog and cat, but in training data it seems that there are noisy samples from horse class. These kind of noisy and relevant samples can adversely affect the model performance. The idea here is to assign valuation to a training data samples based on the cleaned validation data so that we can filter out low valuation samples before learning any underlying ML model. From right image we can see that images of a horse has assigned low valuation using a valuation model and hence filter out. Now one can train the model with high valuation samples to improve overall performance of the system. Data valuation is a function of five things: learning algorithm, validation set, training samples, performance algorithm on validation set using training sample, and the impact of those samples on performance of learning algorithm on validation set. These are three samples from the cat class. In this slide, we will try to answer the question that whether the impact of all the cat images from training set is same or different. And the answer is the impact will be different. It is not necessary that any two random cats drawn from the data set contribute same amount of a gain towards the performance on the validation set. This is because it depends on the distribution of the data in the clean validation set. This indirectly implies that the valuation of each point is also different with respect to the validation data. Accurately identifying the value of a data has a great potential for improving a model performance for real-world training data sets, which commonly contain incorrect labels and where the input samples differ in relatedness, sample quality, and usefulness for the target task. Instead of treating all samples equally, lower priority can be assigned to data points to obtain high performance model. Consider the following scenarios. The first scenario is where cat sample is incorrectly labeled as a dog sample. In this case, it's good to have a log value for cat sample as compared to a dog sample. The second scenario is where input is noisy or low quality. Noisy samples can affect the performance of the classifier. We have discussed the same in the label noise metric also. So it is good to assign a low valuation to the noisy samples. The third scenario is usefulness for the target task. Some label is very common in the training dataset, but not as common in the testing dataset. So it is good to assign a low value to those points. There can be several applications of data valuation framework. Some of them are measure data quality by identifying high and low data quality points, domain adaptation by using validation data from the domain that we want to learn, data gathering. One can gather more relevant samples by using this technique and improve the performance of underlying model. Now let's look at the most intuitive approach, that is leave one out. The idea of this approach is that for each sample, calculate the difference in performance of a model trained with complete data and the performance of the model trained with complete data except the point under consideration. It will give the importance of that particular point or a sample. If this value is positive, that means the performance of model went down after removing that point, which implies high importance of that point with respect to that model. For each sample, we repeat this procedure to get the data values. The only issue with this approach is the high computational cost. This slide shows the pictorial representation of leave-one-out approach that we just discussed. If we want to find value of this cat sample, then we have to first remove this from the data set, which is denoted by X in the right image set, and then we simply calculate the difference in performance of our models. In this case, the performance went down. That means the sample is important with respect to the trained model. The drawback of a leave-one-out approach is that it does not satisfy the natural properties we expect from equitable data evaluation, and it performs poorly in experiments. For a simple intuition of why leave-one-out fails, let us suppose that every training point has two exact copies in the training set. Removing one point from training set does not change the predictor at all, since its copy is still present. Therefore, the leave-one-out approach would assign 0 values to every training point, regardless of how well the actual predictor performs. This simple example illustrates that leave-one-out does not capture the potential complex interaction between the subsets of the data. Next, we'll discuss another approach, that's a data shapely, which basically overcomes some of the issues of leave-one-out approach. In data shapely, the value of each data sample point depends on the training data, learning algorithm, and the performance metric. Data shapely algorithm is based on the concept that the value of a data point comes from analysis of how much it contributes to each subset of training point in the dataset. Let us take an example. If we want to find the value of a star, for that we first calculate all possible subsets where star point exists. This is shown in the first row of second figure. The image in the next row shows the representation after removing the star points and the corresponding model performances. The idea here is to calculate the value of a star based on the performance analysis of all possible subsets of training data and then take an average. If a data point is unique and valuable for the model, it will be rated high in this approach. This is the Shapley value formulation. Left hand side entity denotes the value of a data point I. In right hand side C denotes some normalization constant. And the summation is over all the possible subsets in the data. The numerator is the marginal contribution of the data I to the subset S. Denominator is again a normalization term. In our context, we use the performance of a model. This is how Shapley values assigns value to its data point in dataset. But there are several practical issues with Shapley values. Some of them are calculating the exact Shapley value is not practicable for real-world datasets. Hence, there is a need to approximate Shapley values. In practice, people do Monte Carlo approximation to solve this issue. But even after that, the approach does not scale linearly to large datasets. This slide shows a quantitative analysis from a Shapley paper. As we can see from the figure, that as the noise increases, the Shapley value of a data decreases, which shows the importance of this particular Shapley framework. To handle the scalability aspect of Shapley framework, RL-inspired approach known as DVRL have been proposed in literature that actually scales to datasets of arbitrary size. This is the framework of DVRL. Earlier, we have valuation of a point coming from a Shapley function. Here, we assume that the value comes out of deep neural network. This framework is divided into three main parts: data value estimator, sampler, and reward generation mechanism. In data value estimator, the algorithm tries to find value of each point in training batch, and then sampler selects high valued points. Then algorithm uses validation data to calculate the loss and rewards of RL framework, which updates the data value estimator model. This reward loop will repeat until convergence. This slide shows the quantitative analysis from DVRL paper. From these three graphs, we can see that if we remove high value points, then model performance is most affected, as shown by orange curve. And if we remove low value points, then the model performance is least affected, as shown by blue curve. These results justify the value assigned by DVRL framework to data points. Till now, we have covered four metrics: data cleaning, class imbalance, label noise, and the data valuation. Now we will discuss the data homogeneity metric, which also plays an important role in improving the performance of underlying ML task. I will first give an overview of this metric, and then we will discuss two variations of this particular metric, that is syntactic and semantic based homogeneity technique. In next few slides, we will also discuss a paper which talks about a clustering based approach to calculate the homogeneity score. We call a data homogeneous if all the entries in the structured data column follow a unique pattern. For example, a single date format in the date column. Below image shows the taxonomy for data homogeneity. At first level, we can see that homogeneity can be defined in terms of syntax or semantics. In the next level, each of these types is further classified into two subtypes. Syntactic homogeneity can be calculated using distance-based matching and pattern-based matching approach. On the other hand, semantic homogeneity can be calculated through embedded-based matching and the context-based matching approach. We will see some of these approaches very briefly in the next few slides. For example, there are two sources of data, and in each source there are two columns in the data set. One is the date column, and another is the designation of a person. In each of these sources, data is homogeneous. But after integration of the data from multiple sources, the target data may get completely heterogeneous. As we can see in this new integrated source, two different formats of a date and also two formats of designation category make data inhomogeneous. There can be other possible reasons for inhomogeneity in data sets, like multiple people adding the data in the same source. Different information is available to different people who are adding the data. All these can lead to inhomogeneity in the data. And such kind of inhomogeneity in data set can affect the classifier performance also. Let's take an example from an adult census dataset downloaded from Kaggle. Here the task is to predict income level which can be greater than 50k and less than or equal to 50k. But due to additional dot after greater than 50k and less than or equal to 50k in train and test data, the total number of classes becomes 4 instead of 2. While building a model, we expect the output layer has 2 nodes as it is a 2-class classification task problem. But any automatic pipeline will build 4 neurons in the output layer because of this issue and make the classification task more complex. Similarly, there can be other possible issues like columns having a mix of both floats and integer values, and in float after decimal place we only have a 0. These kind of unnecessary data consumes more memory. Similarly, having a comma in numerical data can be considered string column instead of numerical column. All these can affect the feature extraction pipeline adversely. But the question is, what are the possible sources of such issue? As we have mentioned in the previous slides, there can be several reasons for data inhomogeneity. When the data is gathered by different people, when the data is stored in different formats, which might create encoding issues, and might be there is no proper protocol rule for data collection. Last but not least, when data is merged from different sources. In previous slides, we have seen what is the data homogeneity, what are its possible sources, types of homogeneity, and how inhomogeneity can affect ML models. Now in next few slides, we will discuss how we can calculate homogeneity score for a given data set using cluster-based approaches. There was a paper titled Column Heterogeneity as a Measure of Data Quality, which was published in the VLDB workshop in 2007. This paper talks about the two measures which characterize homogeneity. First one is lesser the number of clusters, better the homogeneity is. This is because a lesser number of clusters means fewer number of different formats found in data set. Second one is among the data with same number of clusters, the one with uniform distribution is more heterogeneous than the one with a skewed distribution. Here are two different ways to measure the homogeneity score for cluster-based approaches. First one is entropy of the cluster distribution, but this way of calculating score is not bounded, hence difficult to say which data set is better or good. Through this mechanism, we can compare two data sets, but for a single data set, it is difficult to generate good insights. Second way is Simpson's biodiversity index. It is the probability that two randomly selected entries not fall in the same cluster, and it is bounded between 0 and 1. In general, I prefer the second metric because here one can compare multiple data sets or can also generate insights for a single data set using this particular metric. Great, we have also covered how we can calculate homogeneity score using cluster-based approaches. Now in the next few slides, we will focus on approaches to calculate syntactic homogeneity. Here are the examples of distance-based syntactic homogeneity. On the left, we see added distance, and on the right, we see Jacquard similarity. The idea of added distance is how much change is required to convert one sample to another. If change is high, that means those samples can be inhomogeneous. Another is based on set theory, where we can calculate similarity between two strings using Jacquard similarity. This kind of metric is not much useful for the homogeneity task that we discussed earlier, but this kind of a metric can help in finding inhomogeneity in spellings and might be useful for some another machine learning task. Another way to solve syntactic homogeneity is pattern or regex-based similarity. In earlier slide, we saw methods that work with distance between strings. Now in this slide, we will see the methods that work with distance between their associated meta patterns like regex. As we can see, the strings method label 1 as the regex language was coarse-grained, but at the bottom level, the string doesn't match as the regex language was fine-grained. The apt granularity of such a regex language is dataset dependent and at times should come from the data steward. Next topic that we are going to discuss is how to check for semantic homogeneity from dataset columns. There are two widely used approaches in literature. First is embedding based approach, another is the context based approach. We will discuss each of these approaches in next couple of slides. Added distance and regex based matching will tell that faculty and academician are completely different entities. But semantic based approaches tell that they are same as they refer to as similar real world entities. These kind of approaches are applicable only when the entries in the data are meaningful English words. User can use different ways to calculate embedding like word-to-vec or globe-based approaches. And then one can simply use a cosine similarity on top of the embedding to calculate the homogeneity or similarity between the data points. But word embedding will not always give good insights. For example, if you want to check salary of a faculty and academician, then we can't say that these two words are homogeneous. In that case, context-based homogeneity can help. We need to train our own dataset specific embedding where we can capture the context using neighborhood samples. Let's take another example where high similarity between manager and employee is not desirable in a dataset. In such cases, these samples can be treated as inhomogeneous. So in this metric, we have seen a different variation of homogeneity that one can find based on different use cases. Like clustering based homogeneity can help if different formats of data is present. Similarly, structural and semantic based homogeneity can help in different use cases. In next metric, we will see how we can fix some of these homogeneity issues using a data transformation. Data transformation is the last metric that we will discuss as a part of structured data quality agenda. The goal of data transformation is to allow and or business users to transform a given data into user-defined format. The data can be different formats or heterogeneous. For example, in the below figure, we have shown a structured data set of which different features are shown in different columns. We can see that for each feature, the data is present in different formats. Such kind of heterogeneity in data can hamper the classifier performance and can also affect any feature extraction task. For example, for gender use case, if someone wants to use one hot encoding with gender column with two entries, female or male, then in that case only two column representations is sufficient. But if user has four entries in that column, F, M, female or male, then for same column, user needs four columns to represent one hot encoding. If such an issue is present in the label column, then the problem becomes more complex and challenging. So it's good to sort these kinds of issues at the data level itself, so that it will not hamper the machine learning performance. That's why this metric is really important in the data quality space. These are some of the data transformation use cases where the first column represents input and the second column represents desired output. Here the idea is to implement a system that can capture user intent and transform the given samples into a desired format while ensuring that the load on the user is kept to a minimum. The most obvious question is how do we capture the user intent and present to the data transformation framework? The most intuitive way for the users is to show their intent through sample input and output pairs, where the desired transformation should convert the input into the corresponding output. In literature, this is also known as programming by example, where the system will take the user provided input and output example pairs, look for a program that satisfies user provided specification in the transformation space expressed using a domain specific language, and present the user with a final transformation program. But what is a domain-specific language? A domain-specific language consists of a finite set of functions or operators that can be used to solve specific tasks. One can formally represent a transformation program using the underlying domain-specific language. For example, in the figure A, the task that user wants to solve is to guide an agent in a grid world from a source to the target. On the left, you can see it's a domain-specific language where different operations have been provided which can essentially help the agent move in different directions. The program would essentially guide the agent, shown in figure using the functions move and turn left. In another example, where the task is to transform a string into another string, as shown in the two columns denoted by input and output. The transformation program that can be used to convert the shown input into output would essentially extract the substring present between the start token and the last slash token. Now the question is, how do we design a DSL? The thumb rule is a DSL should be expressive enough so that all the desired tasks can be achieved using a transformation program from the DSL, and also the DSL should be concise enough so that model can decode the transformation program in real time. There is a lot of prior art which deals with programming by example for string manipulation tasks. We classify the models into three categories based on their working. The first category is the symbolic category, where the model is designed to produce correct programs that satisfy user-specified specification using enumerated search. The model looks for all the possible transformation programs in the underlying problem space and use some kind of heuristics or ranking to provide the user with the final transformation program. Enumerating all the programs is time consuming, which makes these types of models very slow. The second category consists of purely statistical models, which use neural networks to decode the transformation program directly from the input and output example pairs. Similar to other NLP tasks, one can use beam search to decode a list of most probable transformation programs. The only issue with these models is that the program decoded might not satisfy the user provided specification. Also, the model is trained using data sets that are generated synthetically, which might not work well on the real world transformation task. Examples of such systems include RobustFill, neural programming by example. The third category consists of hybrid systems, which are built on top of symbolic methods and use statistical models to smartly search for transformation programs. These methods use directed search to prune out improbable prefixes of the correct or valid transformation programs. However, if any wrong decision is made while exploring or taking decisions, one might end up with invalid transformation program or programs that produce empty outputs. Example, neural guided directed search. In the next set of slides, we will go through models from each category one by one. We will first start with the symbolic systems. These kind of systems essentially decouples the problem of generating the output string into independent problem of generating different parts of the output from the corresponding input. The substrings are generated through various functions that we define in the DSL, and the logic for generating one substring of the output is completely independent of generating another disjoint substring of the output. For example, if you want to extract the number 425 from the given input string, there can be different ways to do that. Like you can extract individual digits and concatenate them later. You can also extract some digit together like 2 and concatenate it with 5. And you can extract 4 to 5 altogether. Each way will have its own transformation program, which can be decoded by moving from root to leaf node in abstract syntax tree. We enumerate all possible decompositions of output string using abstract syntax tree, which is shown on the right figure. One method to generate the substring 425 directly is by extracting them together, which is shown in the middle path. The other method is to first extract 4, which is represented by E1, and later concatenated with either 25, which is shown by E23, or 2 and 5 separately, shown by concatenation of E2 and E3. To generate the substring 425 directly, we can use the substring function from the DSL, where its position indices will correspond to after left parenthesis token and before right parenthesis token. Generation of individual digits or collection of them can follow similarly using the substring functions. In conclusion, one can first enumerate all possible ways of transforming source into a target and later use heuristic on ML models to select a top K out of them. The drawback with such models is the time taken to do such kind of enumerate such search, which gets more and more expressive for complex problem tasks. To overcome the issues of symbolic models, hybrid systems have been proposed, which smartly looks for the desired transformation programs. These techniques basically use statistical system to generate a probability distribution over the DSL operators at each branch of the partially constructed abstract syntax tree, and only use the most likely ones to guide the rest of the search. The neural guided directed search system uses neural networks to predict scores, which helps the model to make the intermediate branching decisions. It eliminates the unproductive branches if the score falls below a certain threshold. It retains only those branches that are most likely to produce the user intended program. There are a couple of ways to rank top programs, which can be based on user desired qualities, program simplicity, its generalizability capability, etc. The only drawback is that there is no way to go back when wrong decisions are made. You might end up with suboptimal ones or eliminating valid programs completely. Third kind of a system proposed in literature is statistical system, like the RobustFill system. One of the motivation for using a pure statistical system like RobustFill is that we want the model to be robust to any noise. For example, if there is any character that is misplaced or incorrect in the input and output string, the model should still be able to produce the desired transformation program. This is where the statistical system overpower the symbolic or hybrid ones, which feel terribly when there is any noise present in the dataset. This work essentially shows superior performance in the case when the noise is present in a dataset. In the diagram of its architecture, the input and output sequences are being encoded in the sequential manner. Authors also use the concept of multiple example pooling in cases where the user provides multiple example pairs for program decoding. It uses different encoders and decoders for each input and output example pair and combines their predictions together using the max pooling. On the right, a more expressive DSL is shown, which enables the system to solve complex tasks in lesser time steps. This slide talks about some of the key aspects of statistical systems. These kind of systems use beam search to decode or predict top most likely transformation programs based on the joint probability of the decoded DSL operators at each time step. These systems use synthetic datasets for model training, and generated model might not be close to real-world tasks, which might lead to generalizability issues. And the most importantly, the statistical system do not guarantee that synthesized program will not throw any syntax error while compiling. One of the ways to handle these issues is by using execution guidance, which we'll discuss in the next slide. In execution guidance system, during beam search, one can keep on executing whatever is synthesized up till then and eliminate the predicted operator and arguments that throw syntax error or produce incorrect output substrings. This is how one can restrict the DSL vocabulary and enforce the correctness. So here we finish our first part of the tutorial, which was related to data quality metrics for structured data. There are several other important metrics in the literature, but keeping timeline in mind, we tried to cover some of the important metrics from ML perspective in this part of the tutorial. In the next part of the tutorial, Shashank Majumdar from IBM Research India will describe how we can address the quality issues in unstructured text space. Thank you all for your time.